I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington, and this week on Face the Nation, President Trump invites Russia's Vladimir Putin to America, his first visit to U.S. soil in a decade. Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. President Trump has decided to bring Vladimir Putin in from the cold, ending isolation of the Russian leader and accused war criminal. His hope is to persuade Putin to finally do the thing he's refused: end Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The two leaders will meet in Alaska, another part of the former Russian Empire. With the future of European security on the line, Western leaders rush to get their word here, Ambassador.
Good morning, America, and thank you for having me.
Well, President Zelensky has made clear he's not just going to give away land to Russia. Kyiv has to be part of the negotiations, and he has said a ceasefire needs to happen first. Do you expect a ceasefire?
Ukrainian cities, Ukrainian defenders on the front lines, Ukrainian children who suffer every day. So yes, we
blow past that deadline to put more sanctions on Russia and instead offered this meeting. We know that the White House says it's a one-on-one with Vladimir Putin at Putin's request, but that the president's open to some sort of trilateral and to bring Ukraine to the table.
Well, Margaret, I can say sometimes diplomacy.
He's not planning to be in Alaska on Friday. We do know that envoy Keith Kellogg is being sent to Kyiv to speak with the Ukrainian government. So what is his role here? Is he going to be sort of conveying messages back and forth? What is it that needs to be negotiated in Kyiv right now?
Well, U.S.-Ukraine agenda, which of course all is...
From our reporting is that envoy Witkoff, Steve Witkoff, went to Moscow. He was described to him was a Russian idea for some kind of settlement of the war, and it included carving up parts of Ukraine. And he said President Zelensky has to get everything he needs ready because, quote, he's going to have to get ready to sign something, and I think he's working hard to get that done.
Well, it's Russia that illegally occupied Crimea and other territories since 2022, this war, and that's why ceasefire as a step has always...
Because your point is the president can't just give away land. It has to actually go and be considered. The Constitution, though, now has these areas he's annexed for your country in his Constitution.
Yes, and everyone knows. And
22% of Ukrainian territory, I believe, at this point. Is your concern that at this negotiating table in Alaska, Vladimir Putin's going to try to talk his way into further land seizures?
Outdated old concepts from the previous century, they do not work anymore. The front line in east and south of Ukraine.
Makarova, thank you for your time today. We'll be right back. We turn now to NATO Secretary General Face the Nation.
Margaret, good to be back on the show. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Mr. Secretary General, big picture here. Is Russia's Vladimir Putin still a direct threat to the Western alliance, or is he showing some sign of dropping his aggression? That is certainly the groundwork being laid. The concern is, of course, as you know, among some critics, that in this conference room in Alaska, we're going to see a 1938 moment, where in an attempt to immediately halt a war, the groundwork is laid for an even bigger conflict because of concessions that are made. Are you comfortable with Ukraine being excluded from these negotiations on Friday? With President Trump. And I know that he briefed you on what Envoy Witkoff discussed with Vladimir Putin this week. Can you tell us, is Russia still demanding that Ukraine drop its bid for NATO membership?
Well, obviously, I cannot go into all...
You've said in the past there need to be strong security guarantees for Ukraine. Who is going to provide that if it's not NATO?
Well, obviously, this is a discussion which is going on for some months now. We all pray for the...
I understand that there were NATO representatives listening in that meeting with Vice President Vance and the European National Security Advisors yesterday. NATO has been coordinating the delivery of weapons purchased by NATO members to help out Ukraine. About $1 billion in military aid, I understand, has been facilitated from the U.S. to Ukraine. Are there plans that those weapons deliveries continue regardless of what happens on Friday?
and our command in Wiesbaden, making sure that Ukraine has what it needs to stay in the fight and be in the best possible position. Is the NATO summit a united NATO, a united alliance, and Putin will never get in between us.
Well, we have to take President Trump at his word. And on Friday, when he spoke in front of the cameras, he said there will be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both Ukraine and Russia.
Peace talks / the ceasefire discussion will take place today if Putin is serious, and Putin then has to commit to sit down with Zelensky. He cannot do this.
Do I understand what you're saying here correctly? When you are talking about legal recognition versus de facto, are you saying that basically the world is preparing to allow Russia to hold on Crimea, the Donbass, the eastern part of Ukraine, but then just not legally recognize it?
No, what I'm saying is that in the end, deciding on what they
okay, because that
want
sounds
to do
like
in terms of...
because that sounds like you're saying they don't have to withdraw their troops. All right, Secretary Rutte, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with a lot more Face the Nation. We go now to Arizona Democratic Senator. President Trump could lift some but not all sanctions on Russia unless Congress agrees to do it. Is there any appetite to lift them? Those details ourselves. Multiple intelligence officials have told my CBS colleague, Jim Laporta, that there was a U.S. directive in recent weeks that all Russia-Ukraine peace negotiation information should not be shared with our partners who are part of the Five Eyes, countries like Australia and the UK that share information with us. You sit on the Intelligence Committee. Were you aware of that directive, and what does it indicate? I have more to talk to you about in regard to immigration and other domestic matters. We're going to have to take a break and back to do that. Stay with us. We'll have more with Senator Mark Kelly, Texas Republican Tony Gonzalez, and a conversation with former Surgeon General Jerome Adams about the future of vaccine research. We'll be right back. Who I understand has a son, was a United States Marine, and she had been in the U.S. for 2 decades, was babysitting her grandson on her son's base when she was detained. Are you asking or somehow managing to get her to be an exception to the rule to allow her to stay in the United States?
That their parents have a process to become a permanent resident and eventually a U.S. citizen. And this...
President Trump won your state by almost 6 points in November. And you know, immigration was one of his top promises to go ahead with crackdown. And you did say you want more done. Is there a benefit to Arizona that just came from this massive fusion from taxpayer dollars into mass deportations? Or are you saying here that these personal cases show that the entire process is flawed?
Vehicle identifies the brown kid. He winds up in lockup for a week. Now, we were able to get him out. He was 13 years old.
This is a really important and emotional issue, and we're going to have to leave it there for today. But I want to have another one with you as you continue to gather information about how this infusion of money is being spent. $45 billion to expand ICE detention facilities. And we're going to pick up that conversation with Texas Republican Congressman Tony. Frustration he experienced and the personal stories he witnessed in these ICE detention facilities. Given your oversight role, have you had similar concerns?
Good morning, Margaret. And while I
think the senator was talking about how it just wasn't working during the last administration, so he was not praising that past system. But in terms of how the current one is being operated, I know you had raised that those being mass deported were not necessarily the worst of the worst and violent offenders. I know that because you issued that letter, immigration offenses, not violent criminals. Less than 1% of the convictions of those deported were for homicide. Only 0.2% were for sexual assault. So doesn't that speak, though, to what Senator Kelly was saying, which is it's not the criminals, it's the grandmas? That this new money will now allow them to actually focus on violent offenders instead of just anyone they encounter who did at one point enter illegally? See, though, in the courts that the Trump administration is trying to do away with detention facilities is in your district, Texas. And you did vote for the One Big Beautiful Bill. And it includes a provision that allows families with children to be held indefinitely, which contradicts that long-standing precedent putting a 20-day limit on detaining children. Do you think that needs to be changed in future legislation? Should there be limits on detaining kids? And we would love to take our cameras into some of those facilities if you could help us do that, sir, because we don't have that access. And I know a number of those immigration advocates have said that. They are frustrated they don't have more access now to share with the public what they're hearing. But now I do want to ask you about this Fort Bliss facility, an Army base that's partially in your district. I understand they're trying to turn it into a place with tents, soft-sided tents, to hold 1,000 individual ICE custody. Doesn't blurring the lines between law enforcement and the military start to get us into uncomfortable territory? Military and law enforcement, that part, besides the accounting, doesn't that make you uncomfortable? All right, Tony Gonzalez, Congressman, appreciate your time. We'll be right back. We turn now to former Surgeon General.
Thank you, Margaret.
I want to ask you about this tragic shooting, motives including that the suspect believed is sick as a result of the COVID vaccine. What do you make of on the grounds of the CDC?
Yes. Well, first off, on behalf of how you respond to a crisis defines a leader. And quite frankly, Secretary Kennedy has failed in his first major test.
Those are some strong words. I mean, the secretary did issue a statement to condemn this shooter and his alleged motivations. I mean, there has been, to be fair, a lot of angry rhetoric against health officials for years now. Why do you think the secretary himself needs to address it?
I'm upset because people at the CDC were calling me while this was going on.
To or some of what Secretary Kennedy said when he was a presidential candidate.
Correct.
But even office, the FDA commissioner on this program said he wrote an article, Why the People Don't Trust the CDC. The secretary himself has said in the past, CDC is a cesspool of corruption. You, to be clear, want the leaders of our health institutions to come out and say health policy, because days earlier, Secretary Kennedy made an announcement that the U.S. is halting $500 million for vaccine research technology known as mRNA. You're very familiar with it because it was used during Operation Warp Speed to very quickly get that COVID vaccine. Secretary Kennedy said, though, mRNA vaccines, quote, don't work against upper respiratory infection. Research due for pandemic preparations.
Well, that's simply not true.
It's interesting you talk about President Trump's great achievement there because he was asked by and this is what he said this week. Take a listen. What would have happened in 2020 if we didn't have mRNA vaccines?
If we did not have...
Respond to the former Surgeon General's views on that CDC shooting. HHS referred us back to the Secretary's earlier statement. We'll be back in a moment. President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff met yesterday in Spain with Qatar's prime minister, all in pursuit of a deal to end Israel's war in the Gaza Strip and to free the hostages. Our Deborah Pata has the latest from Israel. That was Deborah Pata reporting in Israel. We'll be right back. That's it for us today. Thank you all for watching. Until next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.